Authorized police records. Factual video evidence. Raw enforcement. This is bodycam incident reports.
Hey! Step away from the doors. You don't belong on this tier.
I have clearance for this building.
This is executive access only. Keep your hands where I can see them and step back from the bike.
Let me show you my access card.
I said keep your hands visible. Do not reach under that hoodie.
Nexus Corporation maintained a strict physical perimeter around its $800 billion campus. The tech company contracted the municipal police department to position marked patrol units at the outer gates. Building 1 sat at the center of the campus. The drop-off lane and the adjacent parking slots were separated from the main employee lot by a thick red line painted directly onto the asphalt. Civilian vehicles, delivery trucks, and standard employees did not cross the red line. Passing through the automated glass doors at the front entrance required an active corporate RFID badge. Deep inside the building, the Nexus Private Security Operations Center monitored the perimeter through a network of high-resolution cameras. A shift supervisor sat at the central desk, tracking the live feed on screen 4. He watched the facial recognition system identify the man on the bicycle, the software clearing the individual and confirming authorized access without triggering a perimeter alert. Outside on the asphalt, at exactly 7:15 a.m., David Chen rode a rusted 15-year-old Schwinn commuter bicycle up the main approach. He wore a faded gray hooded sweatshirt, plain denim jeans, and a standard cycling helmet. He bypassed the massive visitor parking structure, pedaled directly over the painted red line, and navigated the empty lane toward the executive hub. He coasted to a stop beside the glass doors, stepped off the pedals, and kicked the metal stand down to prop the old bicycle against the stone facade. Before we watch this patrol officer unlawfully detain the founder of the company, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and let me know where you're watching from today. 70 yards away, Officer Todd Barrett sat inside a marked police interceptor SUV. Operating on an off-duty security detail, Barrett was tasked with maintaining the vehicular perimeter. Looking through the windshield of the cruiser, Barrett observed a man in a faded hoodie parking a rusted bicycle directly in the center of the restricted zone. Barrett did not pick up his radio to contact the Nexus Central Security Desk to ask the supervisor about the arrival. He did not open his mobile data terminal to check the perimeter access log. He watched the man unbuckle his cycling helmet, put the SUV into drive, and rolled slowly across the courtyard, bringing the heavy vehicle to a stop 20 feet away from the glass doors. Barrett stepped out onto the concrete. He reached up to his chest and pressed the central button on his body camera to activate the red recording light. He walked toward the building with heavy, deliberate steps, resting his right hand directly on his duty belt. "Hey!" Barrett barked, his voice echoing sharply across the empty courtyard. "Step away from the doors and grab the bike." Chen had just unclipped his helmet. He did not jump at the sudden command. He lowered the helmet to his side and turned around to face the approaching officer. "You crossed the red line," Barrett stated, stopping 10 feet away and planting his boots wide. He scanned the gray hoodie, the jeans, and the rusted frame of the Schwinn. "This is executive access only. You don't belong here. Get the bike off the property right now." Chen did not immediately reach for the handlebars. He maintained his position on the concrete, his posture completely relaxed. "I have clearance for this building, officer," Chen replied, his voice entirely flat. "I am going inside." Barrett let out a short, dismissive breath, taking a half step forward to close the distance. "You are not going inside," Barrett commanded, his tone dropping into a tight, authoritative register. "Keep your hands where I can see them. Do not move toward the doors." Looking directly at the body camera mounted on the officer's chest, Chen lifted his left hand slightly, hooking his thumb into the zipper of his hoodie to lower it a few inches. He reached his right hand toward his neckline, pulling a black fabric lanyard partially out of his collar. The edge of a thick, hard plastic RFID corporate badge slipped out and dangled against his chest, catching the morning light. "Let me show you my access card," Chen said evenly. Barrett did not look at the plastic card dangling from the lanyard. He did not step forward to examine the corporate seal or the name printed on the ID, reacting entirely to the physical movement of the suspect's hand near his clothing. After a positioning command, Barrett lunged forward. "I said keep your hands visible," Barrett shouted, closing the final few feet in two rapid strides. Officer Barrett did not reach for his department-issued taser or the expandable baton secured to his belt. He extended both arms forward, driving his open hands directly into the center of the gray hoodie. The sudden physical force pushed Chen backward, breaking his balance on the concrete. Barrett grabbed the thick fabric near the collarbone with his left hand, using his forward momentum to steer the man laterally across the asphalt toward the marked police interceptor, parked in the drop-off lane. He shoved Chen forcefully against the vehicle, driving the suspect's chest and shoulders down onto the sloping metal of the hood. The heavy steel of the car's body panel popped under the sudden application of weight. The downward trajectory caused the black fabric lanyard to swing outward from Chen's collar. The thick, hard plastic RFID badge clattered against the hot metal of the cruiser, sliding upward and coming to a rest completely exposed on the hood, inches away from Chen's face. The corporate seal and the name printed on the white plastic faced directly upward in the morning sun. Barrett did not look down at the card. He maintained his visual focus entirely on the suspect's hands and shoulder movements. He shifted his stance, widening his boots on the asphalt, and drove a heavy forearm directly between Chen's shoulder blades, pressing his upper body weight downward to pin the man securely in place against the vehicle. Chen did not brace his legs against the asphalt, tense his upper torso, or attempt to twist his shoulders away from the physical grip. He allowed himself to be flattened against the cruiser without initiating any physical counterforce, turning his head to the side and pressing his cheek against the warm metal to keep his airway clear. Reaching down to the back of his duty belt, Barrett unclipped a pair of hinged steel handcuffs. He grabbed Chen's left wrist, wrenched the arm upward toward the shoulder blades at a sharp angle, and pressed the metal jaw of the cuff against the wrist until the teeth engaged and clicked locked. Remaining entirely compliant, Chen smoothly brought his right hand behind his back without requiring any additional physical prompting. Barrett ratcheted the second cuff closed, squeezing the metal rings tight against the skin. He retrieved a small key from his belt and pressed the pin on the side of both cuffs, locking the steel rings in place to prevent them from tightening further. At that exact moment, a sleek silver electric sedan with heavily tinted windows turned into the drop-off lane. It rolled slowly toward the executive hub, stopping 30 feet away from the police cruiser. Keeping his left hand firmly clamped onto the short steel chain connecting the cuffs, Barrett temporarily stopped his preliminary search. He turned his head toward the approaching vehicle, stepping slightly to the side to block the lane. He raised his right hand, pointing his index finger sharply down the asphalt, and made a sweeping, aggressive motion, signaling the vehicle to clear the area immediately. The driver did not roll down the window to ask questions or attempt to bypass the officer, instantly steering the sedan away from the painted red line and accelerating back toward the main employee parking structure. Turning his attention back to the suspect, Barrett grabbed the center chain of the handcuffs and pulled sharply upward, forcing Chen off the hood of the car and back onto his feet. As Chen stood up, the RFID badge slipped off the metal hood and dropped back against his chest, dangling openly from the lanyard. Barrett grabbed Chen by the back of the hoodie and steered him toward the passenger side of the police interceptor. He forced the handcuffed man to stand facing the closed doors, kicking Chen's feet apart with his boot to widen the suspect's stance. Barrett conducted a rapid, aggressive exterior frisk of Chen's clothing. He ran his palms roughly down the outside seams of the denim jeans, hooked his thumbs under the belt line to check for concealed weapons, and patted down the front pocket of the hoodie, entirely bypassing the corporate badge hanging directly in front of him. "You are under arrest for trespassing on a secure facility and refusing to comply with a lawful order," Barrett stated, grabbing Chen firmly by the right bicep and locking his grip. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it before I add a resisting charge to your booking sheet. Regaining his balance on the asphalt and adjusting his posture against the vehicle, Chen turned his head slightly to speak directly over his shoulder toward the body camera mounted on Barrett's chest. Officer, I am stating for the official record that you actively ignored physical corporate identification resting directly in front of you, and you initiated a physical arrest without conducting a basic inquiry, Chen said, keeping his tone entirely devoid of emotion, panic, or anger. Barrett ignored the verbal statement. He tightened his grip on Chen's arm, pressing him firmly against the side of the police interceptor to maintain absolute physical control. Letting go of the suspect's arm for a split second, Barrett reached up to the lapel microphone on his tactical vest to call dispatch. Reaching up with his free hand, the officer gripped the lapel microphone attached to his tactical vest. He turned the small dial on the top of his portable radio unit, switching the active frequency away from the municipal police dispatch band and locking it directly onto the internal Nexus campus security channel. Unit 4 to Nexus Command, Barrett transmitted, his voice carrying over the quiet hum of the cruiser's idling engine. He kept his eyes locked on Chen's back. I have one adult male detained in handcuffs at the front doors of Building 1. Send the shift supervisor out to my location. We are documenting a physical perimeter breach and initiating a permanent trespass warning. Nexus Command copies, the dispatcher's voice echoed through the external speaker, clipped to Barrett's vest. The director of security is already rolling to your location. Stand by. Releasing the microphone button, Barrett took a half step back, dropping his right hand to rest on the heavy buckle of his duty belt. He looked past the suspect, his gaze sweeping across the pristine concrete courtyard and stopping on the rusted Schwinn bicycle propped against the glass facade of the executive hub. I gave you a direct lawful order to step back and leave the property, Barrett stated, his tone flat and authoritative. The asphalt you parked on costs more than that bicycle. You are getting a permanent ban from this entire campus, and your bike is going into the municipal impound lot. Chen did not turn his head to look at the bicycle or the officer. He maintained his position against the side of the police interceptor, staring straight ahead at the tinted windows of the cruiser. The thick plastic RFID badge continued to dangle from the black fabric lanyard around his neck, resting entirely exposed against the faded gray material of his hoodie. The corporate logo and his profile photograph were completely visible in the morning light. Officer, I am noting for the official record that you have currently held me in physical restraints for 4 minutes without requesting my legal name, asking for a driver's license, or examining the corporate badge hanging directly on my chest, Chen said. His baritone voice was perfectly steady, echoing clearly across the empty courtyard toward the blinking red light of the active body camera. Barrett did not look down at the badge hanging on the gray fabric. He did not ask Chen for his name or attempt to physically verify his identity. He simply crossed his arms over his ballistic vest and stared down the empty drop-off lane, waiting for the private security detail to arrive and finalize the removal paperwork. For the next 3 minutes, the courtyard remained entirely silent. Chen did not shift his weight from one foot to the other, complain about the tightness of the steel cuffs digging into his wrists, or offer any unsolicited explanations about his employment status. He maintained a state of complete, disciplined physical stillness against the metal door of the SUV. The silence broke when a sleek black electric-powered security golf cart turned the corner of the massive visitor parking structure. The small vehicle navigated the drop-off lane without producing any engine noise, bypassing the painted red line and rolling directly into the restricted zone. It pulled up behind the marked police interceptor, the rubber tires coming to a complete stop on the concrete. The director of campus security stepped out of the cart. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit and a crisp white shirt, entirely lacking a tactical vest, a duty belt, or a portable radio. He pushed the door of the cart closed and walked methodically toward the police cruiser. He did not rush or call out to the officer. His eyes scanned the physical layout of the scene as he approached, observing the rusted bicycle by the front doors, the city police officer leaning against the SUV, and the handcuffed man in the gray hoodie standing perfectly still. "Barrett," the director said, stopping exactly 5 feet away and evaluating the patrol officer. "Command dispatch reported you had an uncooperative trespasser breaching the executive tier. Caught him riding right over the red line and parking against the glass," Barrett reported confidently, pointing a finger toward the bicycle in the front entrance. He refused to step back when given a direct verbal command, actively reached into his clothing during the stop, and resisted positioning orders. "I secured him and locked down the building entrance." The director nodded slowly, absorbing the verbal report. He turned his attention entirely away from Barrett, stepping around the officer and walking directly up to the handcuffed suspect. He stopped 2 feet away, lowering his gaze to look directly at the black lanyard and the hard plastic RFID badge resting on the faded gray fabric. The director of campus security did not immediately respond to Officer Barrett's incident report. He maintained his position 2 feet away from the suspect, lowering his eyes to read the bold black lettering printed across the white plastic RFID card resting entirely exposed against the faded gray hoodie. The card displayed a high-resolution corporate photograph of the handcuffed man, followed by the name David Chen, and the executive title Chief Executive Officer. The director did not gasp, shake his head, or turn back to the patrol officer to issue a verbal reprimand regarding the failure to identify the suspect. He reached his right hand into the interior pocket of his tailored charcoal suit jacket, retrieving a small standard-issue universal handcuff key attached to a plain metal ring. Seeing the metal key emerge from the jacket, Barrett immediately took a heavy step forward, inserting himself into the physical space between the private security chief and the suspect. He raised his left hand, holding his open palm outward in a standard traffic stop blocking maneuver, while dropping his right hand to rest directly on the grip of his holstered taser. "Director, step back from the vehicle," Barrett commanded, his voice rising in volume and projecting the sharp, authoritative cadence of a street-level patrol officer handling an active crime scene. "That individual is under an active municipal arrest for felony trespassing and resisting an officer. You are interfering with a physical detention. You do not have the legal jurisdiction to release a suspect from my custody." The director ignored the physical barricade and the verbal warning entirely. He did not attempt to argue the law, explain the situation, or order the officer to stand down. He smoothly sidestepped Barrett's extended arm without making physical contact, moving directly behind Chen and placing his own body between the city police officer and the founder of the company. Barrett tensed his shoulders, stepping laterally to re-establish control, but the director was already securing Chen's left wrist. He inserted the metal tip of the key into the keyhole of the rigid steel cuff, turned it sharply to disengage the internal locking pin, and twisted it in the opposite direction. The steel jaw clicked open loudly against the quiet hum of the cruiser. The director repeated the mechanical process on the right wrist, pulling the heavy steel chain away and allowing Chen to bring both of his arms forward. Moving with deliberate slowness, the director placed the empty police handcuffs directly onto the trunk lid of the marked Interceptor, leaving the metal rings sitting on the painted steel next to the radio antenna. Stepping back around to the passenger side of the vehicle, the director turned his body fully to face Officer Barrett. Barrett tightened his jaw, squaring his stance toward the private security chief, and reaching up to the lapel microphone on his vest, preparing to call for immediate municipal backup to handle the jurisdictional breach. "Officer Barrett," the director said, his voice dropping in volume but remaining perfectly clear across the concrete courtyard, stopping the officer's hand inches from the radio button. "You have just physically assaulted, searched, and unlawfully detained David Chen, the chief executive officer of the Nexus Corporation." Barrett stopped all forward momentum. He stared at the director for a split second, shifting his eyes rapidly toward the man in the gray hoodie, looking specifically at the plastic badge dangling from the black lanyard. He did not issue a secondary command, press the radio button to call for backup, or attempt to retrieve his handcuffs from the trunk of the cruiser. The color drained from his face as he remained entirely frozen on the asphalt, his right hand still resting uselessly near his duty belt. Chen did not demand an immediate apology from the officer, raise his voice, or physically rub his wrists where the heavy steel cuffs had pressed deeply into his skin. He maintained his perfectly flat posture. Reaching down with his right hand, he gripped the black fabric lanyard and smoothly tucked the RFID badge back under the collar of his hoodie, concealing the plastic card from view. Turning his attention completely away from the paralyzed police officer, Chen stepped away from the side of the police interceptor, re-establishing his personal space on the concrete courtyard. He looked directly at the director of security. "Director," Chen said, his baritone voice echoing the exact flat, unhurried cadence he had maintained since the beginning of the physical encounter. "Retrieve the officer's physical access credentials. We are initiating an immediate, permanent perimeter freeze on this specific unit." The director of campus security did not hesitate to execute the direct command. He took a single step forward, closing the distance to the paralyzed officer, and extended his open right hand. He demanded the immediate surrender of the Nexus perimeter access card, the physical magnetic master keys to the exterior gates, and the digital radio transponder issued exclusively to the municipal police department for the duration of the security detail. Barrett did not attempt to argue the legality of the request, nor did he ask to contact his precinct captain to mediate the exchange. Moving with mechanical stiffness, he reached down to his duty belt and unclipped the heavy steel carabiner. He placed the brass gate keys directly into the director's palm, reached up to his tactical vest to unweave the plastic radio transponder from his webbing, and surrendered the device. The director methodically secured the items inside his suit jacket, physically stripping the officer of all authorized access to the corporate facility, right there on the asphalt. David Chen did not wait to watch the final exchange of the equipment. He turned his back on the patrol officer, walked over to the rusted Schwinn bicycle, and kicked the metal stand-up with his boot. Gripping the handlebars, Chen wheeled the bicycle toward the executive hub. He instructed the director to contact the municipal chief of police directly, initiate the immediate termination of the master security agreement, and mandate that a different city officer be dispatched to retrieve the marked police interceptor. Chen pushed the bicycle toward the entrance. The internal security sensors registered his approach, sliding the heavy glass panels apart and allowing the founder to step into the climate-controlled lobby. The doors sealed shut behind him, leaving the officer standing entirely isolated on the concrete. The director turned his attention back to Barrett. He ordered the officer to step away from the cruiser and leave the vehicle keys in the ignition. Barrett reached toward the open driver's side door to retrieve his personal gear bag from the cabin and log out of the mobile data terminal. The director immediately stepped forward, placing his hand flat against the doorframe to physically block the officer's access. He stated that the vehicle was officially frozen in place as part of the incident scene and could only be accessed by a ranking municipal supervisor. Barrett pulled his hand back, stepping away from the SUV and leaving his own steel handcuffs sitting entirely abandoned on the trunk lid. 2 additional Nexus security golf carts arrived quietly on the concrete courtyard. The drivers navigated around the painted red line and parked the small electric vehicles at sharp angles, wedging their rubber bumpers directly against the tires of the police interceptor to physically block the heavy vehicle from moving forward or reversing out of the drop-off lane. 4 private security guards in tailored suits stepped out of the carts, fanning out across the asphalt to form a tight, structured perimeter around Barrett. They did not touch him, draw weapons, or apply physical restraints. They simply boxed the fully uniformed city police officer in on the concrete. Following the director's strict procedural orders, the guards escorted Officer Barrett away from the executive hub entirely on foot. They marched him in a diamond formation across the massive corporate courtyard, forcing the armed patrol officer to walk the entire half-mile distance past the visitor parking structure, across the main employee lots, and all the way to the outer public sidewalk like a standard civilian trespasser. 72 hours later, the Nexus Corporate Legal Department filed a formal notice of termination with the city, immediately severing the massive perimeter security agreement due to a documented breach of identification protocols and the physical assault of the chief executive. The sudden cancellation of the contract forced the municipal police department to slash their operating budget, permanently eliminating the highest-paying overtime detail in the district. Officer Barrett was suspended without pay following a brief internal affairs hearing. The body camera footage of the unlawful arrest was pulled by the district attorney's office, resulting in an active grand jury investigation into felony charges of false imprisonment, battery under color of law, and the falsification of an official police report regarding the initial perimeter breach. That's all for today's breakdown. If you want to see more cases where body cam footage exposes the truth, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below letting us know how you think this department handled the fallout. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the next video.
This concludes our analysis. For ongoing access to verified footage, please like and subscribe. Thank you for following Bodycam Incident Reports.